background of ITIS Capital as a firm. And then perhaps we can have more of an interactive session in the form of any questions that you have, and how should people think about a career in fund management over time. So like you said, I finished my MBA in Bangalore back in '06. My career began with Lehman Brothers in Tokyo. That was back in the day where I saw the first bull market. It was a global bull market, and things were looking very rosy. And post that, I was in Hong Kong when Lehman Brothers went through its bankruptcy. I was right in the center. I always say that I'm the only fund manager you'll come across who's seen a bankruptcy live, because you're not used to the concept of bankruptcy in India. And I hope, and I don't think we will see one here. Nomura took us over, so I got a chance to set up the Asia ex Japan desk for Nomura. I did that for 2.5 years. And then I moved to a fund called Oracle Capital, where I managed money for almost 5.5 years. Before setting up ITIS, I used to run the Asia office of a fund called Hutchin Hill. Hutchin Hill was a $6 billion fund. I ran their Hong Kong office, managing almost $400 million investing in India. I came back in 2017 to set up ITIS. It's been a 7-year journey. Today, we manage around 1,300 crores, investing across listed equities. We run a multi-cap focused fund, and we are a 18-member team across Chennai, Houston, and now a small Bangalore office as well. So this is our background, my own background. And so I am not a CA. I didn't get into fund management. If you look at the track record of many fund managers in India, they come from a CA background. And the thought process is the best people who read balance sheets obviously are CAs, right? Typically, it's very hard for me to hire a CA, because I believe the skill set required to be a good analyst comes from more of a human and a psychological background than just reading balance sheets, because that's the easy part of being an analyst. The difficult part of being an analyst, which very few people pay attention to, is reading history, reading psychology, understanding and appreciating the role of arts in fund management rather than just treating it as a science. And I think that's where there is a big gap between how I view fund management versus how the traditional industry views fund management. So, with that as a context, we can go into more of a discussion around what does it take, why should people think about fund management, and what are the skill sets that I believe are required in this industry.
Sure, sure, yes. I'll just ask you one slightly different question. Being a CA, I can maybe share that aptitude. We CAs are very good at our subject. Maybe that strength becomes also a weakness in a way. So you also mentioned that also we CA have a mindset that, okay, if I know how to read a balance sheet, which in a way true, that is where I have an edge over understanding, or I can do a valuation, which is not true because you need a lot more. So my question is, what we can do to improve ourselves in that direction? So is it like, can we read about a company, or does reading any news channels add any value? Like, what can we do better to improve ourselves?
So you are right in the sense that CAs have an edge that clearly other people will not have. I still remember when I went into my B school days, right? The first semester, we had a course called corporate finance. And as an engineer, I could tell you 70% of the batch could not match the LHS and RHS of a balance sheet. We just couldn't. We didn't know what that meant. And I still remember a really good friend of mine who was a CA taking tutorials around what assets mean and what liabilities mean. And the commonality between engineering and CAs is we learn to think of the world from the view of 0 and 1, which means if numbers match, it's a good thing. If numbers don't match, it's a bad thing. I think the world is unfortunately somewhere in between. It's a lot of gray, right? Now, in order to understand this gray, uh, it's not about news channels, because again, human mind, if you go back into how the human mind works, we always want reasons for everything. For example, let's say today India is doing well. We want to understand why is India doing well, and we want to rationalize A, B, C. This is why India is doing well. Now, unfortunately, you just can't say causation is equal to correlation. What that means is if this is the cause, that correlates to something doing well, right? It is again in the area of gray. So, how does one try and reconcile this? I always believe in this concept of cycles and pattern recognition. And for you to understand pattern recognition, you have to do and understand two aspects. One is the probabilities. You are in the world of probabilities. Many people think you're in the world of prediction. You have no role to predict in the fund management industry. Your job is to understand and appreciate probabilities, and your job is to understand and relate with what I call history. In fact, some of the best books about money management have been written. If you go back and study the civilization of how Mesopotamia came into being, the first books on wealth management came from that era. Mesopotamia was supposed to be one of the richest civilizations. If you go back and read that civilization, they teach you the concept of wealth management. Whatever we say today has been written many, many centuries ago. So, what are we talking about, right? It's about saying whatever you see today has happened in some shape, way, or form. Your job is to go back and read history, read businesses, read cycles, and then look at correlating and appreciating these patterns. So, if you ask me, how does one cultivate this? You have to cultivate this with an art and appreciation of history. I don't think there is a shortcut. You have to understand various businesses, and it takes time. So, unless and until you have patience and you give it at least 10, 15, 20 years for you to actually build this, you will not appreciate a lot of what I'm saying. And which is why this is one industry which doesn't have what I call a retirement age or a shelf life. If you have what I call a wealth of experience, how you are at 40 versus how you are at 50 will be very, very different. So, those are the aspects that I think I would want students to appreciate and I would want students to focus on. It's not easy because it requires patience.
Sure, sure. Yes, Naveen, thank you. One more thing which I've observed among the student these days is easy access to the market, especially as with the introduction of Zerodha and other new age brokers. It's become easy for the public at large to access and trade and invest and so on. So one common thing I observed among students is they are somehow getting attracted towards this trading, intraday trading. I buy, I sell. So there's more becoming a speculative market, which I tried my level best to discourage that, but somehow that phenomenon still exists. So, and many people think that by doing those trading things, they can get an entry in fund management and they can become fund manager. So, what are your thoughts on that?
See, I think there are certain aspects of human elements around how the mind operates that is never going to change, right? Drinking, gambling, and smoking are three things that will always be close to us as humans. These are three basic human vices. So, if you ask me, should someone not trade? I will say no. I will not even ask anyone not to trade. I will say, before you get into the industry, please trade. The reason I would always say that, because you started off by saying you try and discourage, I don't discourage. I think people should try everything. If they want to trade, I would say trading will also teach you something about yourself. And if, assume you go bankrupt through the process of trading, I think you will come out a better risk manager, or at least you have a higher probability of coming out a better risk manager. The thing that I would always advise is if you're going to trade, read books on risk management and then trade. So I will never discourage trading. It is inherent to human behavior. Everyone, the most sophisticated of investors and the Gen Z who are entering the markets, do trade, and I will always encourage trading. Over time, your evolution as an investor would evolve around trading. So, I personally believe trading is important. People should do it. I don't do it as a fund manager doesn't mean what they do is wrong. Right. So, that's my view. The question, though, is through the process of trading, there are some nuances that one can pick up around risk management. If you can do that, I think it can be beneficial for you.
Yeah, sure. I don't go against the concept of trading, but just that being a student, where I feel that you have having the priorities wise, and they feel that maybe this you are getting attracted also because of social media, that fin influencer, YouTube people, maybe like on those background, which I thought that that may not be suitable, especially when somebody is sitting preparing for examination. Yes, I do take a point that trading is a profession. I would say that's a difficult profession. Some people say the probability is too less. In my opinion, any profession, if you want to excel, the probability is less. The top people is always less. It is just that how you excel at particular doing things, and that's ultimately determine the outcome. Okay. Yeah. A few more questions. So one of the question I got is like, what is a typical day of a fund manager would look like? What is the how you occupy yourself with?
See, the typical day versus how I would like it versus reality are two different things all the time, right? Because
Absolutely.
as a fund manager, you're also straddling multiple roles. For example, operationally, you have work to do. You also have work to do around managing clients' emotions from time to time. You have business to run. So there are a lot of things that go into the ambit of what a fund manager is meant to do. So let me not go into all of that because that will just complicate anyone's life who's listening to it. But according to me, in an ideal day, how I would like to structure myself, I like to travel 3 to 4 days a week, right? I don't like to sit and just sit and read books. That's not how you learn. For me, when we are picking up a new company, I would like to learn a lot from the promoters, the actual plant, if it's a manufacturing one. Try and build a network of understanding who are the distributors of the companies. Can I go and meet them? Understand from them what is making them tick and work with this company versus competition. Try and see if I can understand and meet competitors and see how well they are actually perceiving their own competition. See, typically, one thing in the industry is simple question that I like to ask promoters is who's one company in your space that you respect? That one question will teach you a lot about a competitive edge of a particular company. So for me, a lot of my time actually goes on the ground. So if you say a typical day, I like to travel 4 days a week, meeting companies, meeting suppliers, meeting distributors, meeting partners, meeting ex-management people who may have left the firm. And I can't stress the value of all of this. Your job is like a detective because there is no in my world, there is nothing called a good company or a bad company. It's a cycle. There are times where a good company does bad things, and there are times where bad company also does good things. There's no one has the intent to do evil, right? Generally, humans are not like that. So you have to understand what is driving the motivation of that entrepreneur. So that you can only do not by sitting and reading balance sheets alone. 10% of your job, roughly, is actually on the desk where you sit, study balance sheets, sit and study transcripts, see if the promoter has done what he's said and said what he's done. And then you put together what I call a basic valuation framework to value a business. So typically, this is how I would split our what I call a week. Rather than a day, I would roughly call it a week. A lot of the work is actually on the ground. Some part of the work is studying balance sheets. And over time, you build a strong network, right? Certain people that you go back to, you want to actually see if your views can get contradicted by someone such that you know you can uncover your blind spots And there is a certain level of reading as well, which you want to be doing. Question is, what do you read, right? My reading is not so much around investment books,
Okay.
because there's only that much you read by investment books. Everyone that has already said what they wanted to say is already done. So picking up an extra investment book and reading, I don't believe is going to give you any additional insight. I like to read history. I like to read autobiographies of people. I like to read human psychology. I like to read the entire aspects of how civilizations were built, sometimes science. So I think reading diverse aspects help. That's how I would structure my week. Not I didn't cover the day because I think a week is a better timeline for you.
True. Sure, sure, sure. And one more question I got is like, would that NISM certificates, what you have, various certificates conducted, of course, like in mutual funds, in PMS, and so on, would that add any value in any sense?
See, I think end of the day, what is a degree add, right? Certain things need to be done from a regulation perspective. Certain things need to be done to show the world that you have certain level of discipline. Why does the industry look for CAs? Because to sit for that exam and come out as a rank holder is bloody hard, right? So when you come out on the other side, you are showing the world that you have two things. You have a good grasp of numbers, and more importantly, you are extremely disciplined, right? These two characteristics cannot get replaced in the fund management industry or in the investment industry. So, NISM is more so a regulatory requirement for most part. So, you have to take it up. For example, there was an exam for us too, where I had to study. Did I enjoy studying it for that exam? Answer is no. But when your regulator says you have to do it, you have to do it. So, certain things you have to do it just to ensure that you don't go on any side on the wrong side of regulation. NISM is such, it's a framework that tells you that you have to do it. So in that aspect, it does, you don't have a choice. But if you ask me, does that tell you that you will be a better industry expert? Answer is no, but it's required.
Sure. Yes. Definitely, yeah. It's any knowledge is need not always come from the just the course we do. It's all we learn any part of the life, reading, experience, interaction, and so on. One more question: is there any age limit which you look at when you hire, or any of that sort? Somebody need to be concerned about in the path becoming a fund manager, or when you start your career, maybe.
See, if I mean, a fund manager is a process, right? Uh, what in your journey, if let's say an aspiring CA wants to enter the investment management field, their journey will evolve over time. First, it will morph into a role where they will be doing a lot of work on a particular company around the balance sheet and numbers. Then they will actually travel in order to talk to the management, talk to people around the industry, understand and ask the right questions. Then they will learn the art of valuation itself, because valuation is an art, not a science. Right? It's you don't place beyond the point too much of emphasis on a model. It's a guideline to give you a range of outcomes around how you can value a company. And then once you become what I call a good analyst, one important underemphasized skill is communication through writing, because most people don't teach or emphasize on this skill. But the art of writing helps you in terms of clarity of thought. So that's a skill set that I really, really look for. Someone who cannot write, I will personally not hire. I think that's extremely important for me, because I can say what I want. But when I'm putting pen to paper, I have to have a lot of clarity in my thought process. So that's an important skill set that I would really look for. In terms of age, I think end of the day, I'm looking for passion, energy, and the skill sets that I spoke to you about, not really age. I think for me, the energy and the drive that you have matters, not so much the age. So once you have the ingredients of an analyst, You then start covering multiple companies. Then you began to appreciate risk. And then potentially you have the chance of managing a fund. So it's a journey. I don't think you can fast track it. If you say you want to play cricket for India, you might have extreme amount of talent. But unless and until you go through the first school team, your domestic Ranji trophy, then maybe India under 19, then play for your country, you can fast track it, but then you'll slip, right? So certain things require a certain timeline. And I don't think this is an industry which you should force in order to do things that you're not meant to do. So it's not so much about the timeline, but it's about having the patience to go through this process.
Sure, sure. Yes. Uh, the next question, I knew kind of an answer, still I would like to answer for the benefit of people at large. To what extent this theoretical understanding is relevant? Because so many people have read this model, that Walter model, and some models in so financial management theories. It is also done long time back, and that also assuming certain situations that may be relevant to understand some context, definitely required to pass the exam. But beyond that, do you see any relevance in the path of becoming a fund management?
See, in the investment management field, I always overemphasize common sense. I think common sense is not very common. That is the most important skill set I look for. Uh, my simple test when I speak to people is, can you explain things to me, assuming I'm dumb? Think of me as a fifth grade student. If you cannot explain how you look at a business, I will not hold you in very high regard. So, the more complicated jargon you use, it will put me off. Jargon is generally used in order to mask your lack of knowledge. That's how I think about jargons and models and all of that. Because end of the day, the market is not always efficient in the short term. It shows its efficiency in the long term. So if you believe, then that's the reason alpha can be generated over time, right? Because you look for these inefficiencies. It can come because of short term expectations, it can come because of earnings not meeting expectations, whatever, right? So beyond the point, models don't matter to me. What matters is common sense, your understanding of the world, and your ability to simplify things. That's just me, and that's how I think about the world. People could have different opinions of the world, but since you asked me my personal view, I'm not a big fan of modeling.
Yeah, sure, definitely. Uh, since you said at the beginning, I mean, you look at various qualities, what are the typical things that CA actually lack on the negative side? Like you said, you look forward to few things, but you would have, in whatever your circle, you have come across that CAs really are not so good at, that they are not fit for fund management. We are not generalizing that CAs have a negative quality, but what do you think, in your opinion, which is not actually matching the expectation in the industry of fund management from a CA
No, I
perspective?
think see, the transition from CA to fund management takes time, right? Ideally, it is a CA to an investment analyst to covering companies, to covering sectors, to having a broad range of industry knowledge, and finally becoming a fund manager after having a view on risk. So let's take it step by step. I don't think, I mean, see, end of the day, anyone, I always believe if you have curiosity within you, you have the core ingredient of becoming a good investment analyst. If you approach the world from purely numbers perspective, I think you will not appreciate the art of investing. You will appreciate the science of investing. Investing has two components to it. One is the art aspect, another is the science aspect. The science aspect, I think CAs will be brilliant at, because who better than them in terms of understanding where the cooking up of numbers happens, right? They're brilliant. In fact, I've some of the best people I know and I speak to are CAs. The art aspect is always what is expensive, what is cheap. It's a relative number, right? Sometimes someone could say a multiple of 45 is cheap. Someone sometimes could say multiple of 20 is cheap. Both could be true at the same time. And unless and until you contextualize this with the aspect of growth, industry, where you are, you will not appreciate these things. So that's the art of investing. I think because you are trained so much from numbers perspective, it's the same thing around engineering too, because everything worked in the concept of 0 and 1, where outcome is more important than process. The art of investing is underappreciated. So I think if someone can balance out these two, as well as, I think generally the course does not lend itself into writing and communication. So if these three can be balanced, I think you will get a very well-rounded investment analyst.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think we are almost close to the end of the session time. We are towards the end. I think I've covered all the questions. Yes. So I just want to have any other thoughts from your side in general, just to wrap it up, and then we can conclude.
No, I mean, like I said, this is an exciting time to be in India, right? For the last 20 years, money in terms of equity investing has always been there in the markets. Now, the entire world's attention is on India. So you are at a pivotal point in terms of our economy, transitioning from what I call a services based economy into a manufacturing based economy. And if you study history, that transition is always associated with a very big GDP multiplier effect. So I think the next 10, 15 years is an exciting time for everyone in the country. And CAs coming out studying such a rigorous course, you guys should be extremely excited about the next phase of the journey that you're going to go through over the next 10, 15, 20 years and beyond. So, appreciating this, having a more positive outlook towards life and the country at large, I think those are the three important takeaways for me, for everyone who's listening to this. And that's what I would leave everyone with as we wind up this conversation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for your time. There's one area which I could see in general is the gap between what industry is expecting and what is this all curriculum, including CA, is trying to portray. For various reasons, feel still there is a gap to be filled in. I try my level best to bridge the gap, and for the benefit of students, I'm trying to bring a lot more programs. So thank you so much, Naveen, for this your time. I hope students made the best use of it, and all the best. Thank you, Naveen.
Thanks a lot, Chinmay. I sincerely appreciate you for this
Yeah,
time. Have a
thank you so
lovely
much.
day.
Yeah.